So with that, I would like to bring up our next speaker, Marcus Gover, who is coming to us from the UK and is the CEO of RAP. And he's going to be sharing with us today the work that they're doing and talking more about these systems and complexities. So that being said, I'd like to introduce Marcus to join us. Is he in the room? There he is. Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right. Pleasure to meet you. Yes, thank you. All right.
Right. Perfect. Well, thank you very much for inviting me to come to speak to you today. It was lovely to arrive in Barcelona in the sunshine yesterday, having left a very miserable London. So I'll come to Barcelona anytime and talk. I love coming here. But I want to talk about the circular economy and achieving sustainable benefits today, and also use some of our European projects that we're collaborating with other partners around Europe on, which you see listed up here to show how they demonstrate that. RAP is the Waste and Resources Action Programme. We started in 2000, and our first remit mission was to help the UK catch up with Europe on recycling. The UK was so far behind if you went back to 2000 on recycling, and our job was first of all to catch up, and we did that. There's still more to do there, but our vision has expanded, and it's really about resource efficiency now. And our vision is a world in which resources are used sustainably. And our mission, how we try to do that, is accelerating the move to a sustainable resource efficient economy through reinventing production, rethinking how we consume, and redefining how we reuse and recycle. So that's at the heart of everything we do. And our focus is food and drink, clothing and textiles, electrical and electronics. And we've chosen those because we think that's where we can have the biggest impact. And if we just look at the UK, they account for 25% of our carbon footprint, 80% of water footprint, and 40% of household waste. And that's what drives us to focus on those areas. They have a similar impact in Europe as well. Roy earlier today was talking about imagining the circular economy. And I think, unfortunately, we still have to imagine a lot to see the circular economy in Europe. And if I put it in numbers, this is a Sankey diagram, which is often used for energy, but it tells you the flows of materials through the European economy. And this is just food and manufactured goods, so ignoring the construction and the mining and the other materials. But you can see there that we're extracting together over 1 billion tons of materials. We're importing nearly 500 million tons of materials, and then consuming around 2 billion tons of materials for our daily lives. And if you look at the issues around that, I mean, if you first of all look at the supply side, we need nearly 400 million tons of food to feed ourselves in Europe. And then we just heard all about clothing, we're buying around 300 billion pounds worth of clothing in Europe. So 300 billion pounds worth of clothing is being produced for us. And similarly, we buy 1.8 billion electrical items. So that's 1.8 billion gadgets and washing machines and so on to make our lives easier. An awful lot of things that we're buying and are being produced for us. And that's the role of the suppliers. But when we then come on to the role of us, the citizens, and I think today is all about citizens here, we have a big role too. And you can see that all that food is produced for us, and then we throw away nearly 90 million tons of food. And the clothes that we buy, we don't actually wear, we tend to leave them in our wardrobe. And we have some evidence, some research from the UK that says around 30% of the average wardrobe, the clothes in there haven't been used for a year. And if we were to sell them, because most of them are still good, they could be worth £1 billion to consumers in the UK. So it's a big opportunity there. And then with electrical goods, when we talk to consumers about their appliances, the washing machines and fridges, around half of them thought they didn't last as long as they wanted them to. And in some cases, the lives might have been half the life they expected. So we're finding that the goods didn't last long enough. We also found with electronics that people had hoards of electronics worth a lot of money in their attics that they didn't know what to do with, and again, we're missing out on opportunity. And when you move on to the other part of this equation, which is the recovery, the reuse, the recycling, you find that nearly 70% of all that household food waste is being disposed of, either to landfill or to incineration. It could actually go to anaerobic digestion, generate renewable electricity, and also a fertilizer to grow more food. Much better to prevent it, of course. And then around 38% of clothing, nearly 40% of clothing being disposed of. And when you look at the electronics, electricals, well, less than 10% is being reused. And a lot of it still has reuse potential. So if you look at that, that's a picture of the circular economy in Europe. And I think another thing that Roy talked about was the circular economy isn't about recycling. Well, really, recycling is the last thing about the circular economy. It is about everything before that, right back to the production side and the consumption side. The recycling is really the last bit, so that was quite right. The solution at RAP, we think, is a new model, and it's what we're calling the new 3 Rs of the circular economy. And it is that reinventing design and production. That's the role of the supplier and the retailer and the seller. It's about rethinking how we consume, and that's the role of the citizen, and then redefining what's possible through reuse and recycling, which is the role of those in the supply chain who are recovering what we throw away. If we do that, we can deliver those sustainable benefits, which is what I want to come back to today. I want to just look at each of those areas in turn and look at what we might do to make things different. So, first of all, on reinventing how we design and supply, what has to change there is about designing products to last. It's offering longer warranties, which we know that consumers want. But it's also about these new resource-efficient business models, which the next session is going to be about. Changing how we lease products, we have services provided rather than products, really changing the way that we can consume. And we have a European project called Reba, which is all about developing and testing and implementing resource-efficient business models. It's been running for about 2 years now. We're working with partners from the Netherlands and from the UK. As you can see there, Catherine from KTM was talking yesterday. They're key partners in this. And that's developing 30 pilots of new resource-efficient business models across Europe. And we've got most of those underway now, and we will be reporting in a lot more detail about those in the future. But just to give you a flavour, that a lot of people are talking about the circular economy, but there are some who are doing things about the circular economy. And this project's about that, and there are other things happening too. So first of all, this is a tailor, a clothing supplier in the UK called Alexandra Wood, and they're supplying clothing designed to last. They're deliberately manufacturing. It tends to be formal wear, but suits, and they're looking at how they use the fabrics, designing the fabric to last longer, but also offering a rental service as well. And that's changing the way that people are buying this type of clothing. This was what I saw walking around a department store in London, and there are other manufacturers who are doing this as well, but this company was selling its washing machines and selling it on that they've been tested to last for 20 years and offering a longer warranty to go with it. So somebody designing their products differently to last. We're also working with other companies, as I say, who are doing that. And then at the train station one day, I was accosted by a company with this, which was the Laundrap. And this was saying, why do you want a washing machine? With my smartphone, I could arrange for my laundry to be picked up, washed and delivered back, ironed as well, to my house. So that's sort of the future, removing the need for the product at all. So we're seeing things start to change there. The second R was for the consumer, for the citizen, rethinking how we use and consume products. And this is about buying what we need. So for food and drink, as simple as making a shopping list before going shopping and thinking about what it is we want. We know that people buy more than they need and then don't store it properly and they end up throwing it away. It's also about using what we've got though. And I mentioned 30% of the wardrobe not being used. So it's about looking in the wardrobe, selling things we don't want, changing how we do things. And then about repairing things so that they last longer. There are repair services, there are for clothing, for electrical goods and so on. And it's about using those. We have a project trying to change in some of this space called ECAP, which is the European Clothing Action Plan. And again, that's a partnership with companies from the Netherlands, from London, the Danish Fashion Institute, and I launched this at Planet Textiles in May, so this is quite a new program. It covers the whole life cycle of clothing, and it's working on a lot of the things that we were just hearing about just now, about the importance of the fabric choice and the importance of recycling at the end, but also the importance of how the clothing is used and how long it's kept. I'm not going to talk again about some of the things we just heard. It was really good to hear that from Cecilia. But what I will talk about is the part about the citizen and keeping things for longer. And there's a company called Bronte Vu, which is a very small company, and they have set up a system where I could rent my wardrobe to somebody else. So it's particularly aimed at women. If I looked at my daughter's wardrobe, then there's a lot of stuff in there that she hasn't worn that she could certainly easily rent out to others. And this is a company that's starting to do that. This is also working with our Reba program. And then this is a company called Nudie Jeans, and they will sell you a pair of jeans which is guaranteed to last forever. And if they ever need repairing, they'll be repaired free of charge. And when you have finished with them, if you don't want them anymore and you take them back, they'll give you 20% off your next pair for trading in the old pair. The old pair they then make into other products, and you can see carpets and bags and so on have been made from the old jeans. I didn't know about this company. I was walking through London, I passed the shop, and inside, that's what I saw, somebody behind a sewing machine surrounded by jeans. I wasn't sure what really was going on. I didn't expect that in London. And on going in, I'd learnt all about this new product. So I have a pair, which I was wearing yesterday. I'm not wearing them today. But a pair of jeans which, I guess the question is, which will last longer, me or the jeans, really? And then finally, this is our work with the London Waste and Recycling Board in London as part of the European Clothing Action Plan. And this is targeting young consumers, 18 to 24-year-olds, and trying to change the way that they think about clothes. And it uses a campaign called Love Your Clothes. And this tells citizens how to make their clothes last longer. It talks about washing, it talks about drying, caring for clothes, it talks about how to repair and alter them, and also about things like stain removal. Lots of tips, lots of videos, trying to encourage people to use clothing in a different way. The final R is rethinking what's possible through reuse and recycling. And the solution here is about new ways of capturing things back, so trade-in models, about remanufacturing, about reuse, and quality recycling to recover critical materials. I've been talking a little about electrical goods in the UK. All the electrical goods that we use in the UK have 30 tonnes of silver in, 3 tonnes of gold, and half a tonne of platinum group metals. Yet when we come to recycle them, we lose most of that. So we know that we're probably landfilling a tonne of gold a year in the UK. And if you think about the price of gold, which is actually very much higher than it was, that's a lot of money to be throwing away, to be burying in the ground. So here's a place where we can change how we do that. And we have a European project called the Critical Raw Material Recovery Project, and that's all about harvesting those critical raw materials from unwanted electronic products. And that's, it's not just gold and platinum and silver, but graphite, cobalt, antimony, tantalum, and other rare earths. And again, you can see a range of partners across Europe who are going to make a difference there. One good case study that we've used here, we worked with Argos, a UK company, on a trade-in scheme, and this was a gadget trade-in scheme. And this means that when I finished with my phone, not this one, but perhaps an older one, I could take it to them and they would give me an instant price for it. And then take it there and then and give me a voucher to spend in their store. And the secret of this way is for them to know the value of something. And by doing that, they just make it really easy for me as a citizen to do the right thing. They will then make sure that the data from the device is cleaned properly. They'll then either have it reused or properly recycled to get the gold back. That's a successful program. It started with a pilot and it's been rolled out now across all of their stores. Another example is a company who are refurbishing appliances called Environmicom. And this is their washing machine refurbishment. And you can see there that the drum is being taken out. But when I went round, I also saw all of the soap trays being almost cleaned with toothbrushes. And the product looked as new at the end and was then sold with a guarantee. And that's changing what we do with some of these appliances. And then finally, trials with the Critical Raw Material Project that I just mentioned. This is my local waste facility near where I live. I went along and I looked inside the skip where the waste goes, and you can see in there, there's a couple of lawnmowers. they look almost new. I'm sure they would work. And in the bottom left corner, you can see there's a computer there. That will be full of gold and silver. That's all going to be lost once it's sat there in the rain. It will just be shredded and the plastic and metal recovered. So we're trying to find other ways to capture that used electrical items and get the gold and silver back. We have a trial going on in the UK and also a trial going on in Italy to try to change what we achieve there. Now, if we do all of those things, then we can achieve sustainable benefits. And it's not just carbon emissions and water emissions we're saving, but it's also opportunity for economic growth and for employment. And we've modelled what those benefits might be across Europe. We've looked at if we were to increase waste and recycling, remanufacturing, repair and reuse, and some of these new service models. What would be the impact for carbon, for economic growth, and for employment? And we looked at 3 scenarios. A first scenario where we just pretty much carry on as we are. And if we did that, then we would probably add around 10% to the recycling rate in Europe. There wouldn't be very much increase in reuse, no progress in remanufacturing, and a little bit more of the leasing and service models. We then looked at a model which is more like the EU Circular Economy Package, which we're calling current development. That would increase recycling by around 20%. You get a moderate increase in those other areas. And finally, a transformation where if we really go for the circular economy, really imagine that and make the dream come to reality, that's a dramatic increase in recycling and a dramatic increase in remanufacturing and a dramatic increase in new service models. And we looked at each of those from a carbon point of view, an economic point of view, and a jobs point of view. When we looked at jobs, there's currently around about 3.5 million people employed in the circular economy in Europe. We found that if we just carry on as we are, we'll probably add another 250,000 jobs, which would be very worth doing by 2030, and probably reduce unemployment by about 60,000. If we move to the sort of EU Circular Economy Package approach, the current development, that would add 1.2 million jobs across Europe by 2030. So that's quite a significant increase from 3.4 million, and reduce unemployment by 250,000. But if we really, really were to go for it, then that's 3 million more jobs and reducing unemployment by 500,000. That's really worth doing. There are parts of Europe that could really, really benefit from that. In terms of economy first, the GVA gain, some gain from the current, a good gain from going on to the circular economy package, but if we were to really go for it, there's nearly 500 billion worth of gross value added to the economy in Europe. So there's a big economic prize. And then finally, the carbon prize. There we could be saving between 150 and 200 million tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent by really transformationally implementing the circular economy. So what you can see from this is that there are things that we can do to make the circular economy reality. It needs the suppliers, it needs us as citizens, and it needs those who recover when we finish with things. But together this is good for the environment, it's good for the economy, and it's good for employment. So really can deliver sustainable benefits. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. We do have a couple questions. If you want to join me over here in the question booth. So thank you so much for your presentation, and I think that you present a really solid, comprehensive look at not only circular economy, but shared economy as well as repair economy, and it really is sort of this intersection that's bringing so much, I think, forward in terms of how we create these solutions. One of the questions that one of our audience members had is, how do you see that the circular economy, we see all these numbers that are put out here, but how do you see that it creates jobs? And what do you sort of envision, or do you have some insights into that?
Yeah. Is that working?
Yeah.
Yes. I guess what the circular economy is about is changing materials, resources for labour. Mm-hmm. And so if you were to remanufacture some of our products, they're products that we've often imported to make them last longer, to make them back as new again. That's using local labour, creating jobs, adding a lot of value without using resources. Mm-hmm. So the value per tonne that you're adding in terms of resources is huge when you do that. The remanufacturing is the biggest opportunity by far, which is about refurbishing a product so that it is as new with the same guarantee, and you couldn't tell the difference. I sit on a remanufactured chair in my office. You can't tell the difference between that and a new chair. It's exactly the same. The guarantee's the same. It just costs half as much, and it's used hardly any materials.
Excellent. So we're really kind of looking at revitalizing a workforce around a relationship to our products that we've sort of separated ourselves from over the last 15, 20 years as we've seen repair shops and centers disappear, and now they're coming back. And I think your example of Nudie Jeans is a great one, and you anticipate we'll see more of this in different sectors as well.
I think often you find smaller companies showing what's possible, and perhaps then the larger ones make it mainstream.
Yeah. And do you think that the solution is for companies to engage in their own initiatives around repair and replace and circular, or that it's really about investing in sort of a cottage, as I said to Cecilia earlier, a cottage industries emerging?
I think there are opportunities for larger organisations to do this as well, and that there's a lot of value that they can add for their own businesses. There's profit to be made by doing this. If you look in other parts of the world, you do see different models. One of my colleagues went to visit Korea and to see how electrical goods are sold in Korea. And if you go to a shop in Korea, you'll walk in and it looks like an ordinary shop selling from phones to washing machines. But half the shop is about selling and half the shop is about repair. And if you have a problem with your phone or your computer, it's fixed while you wait. If there's a problem with a washing machine, you'll phone up and they'll say, what time this morning would you like it fixed? When I have a problem with my washing machine, it might take a week to get it fixed. So it's a very different service culture, but a huge opportunity, I think, to increase profitability for companies as well as benefits for consumers.
So let's talk about materials for a minute. One of the things that I've wondered also is, do we envision that suppliers of raw materials will actually need to get into the business of supplying reutilized materials, and that there's a role for them, or do we think that belongs to other industries to kind of emerge to support that?
I think we in the last presentation we heard a great example of how it can be done. To see H&M using recycled cotton back into their own garments. They're not getting into the recycling business themselves, they're using partners to do that who specialize in it. And I think that's the way to do it.
And so ultimately, though, I mean, in terms of like the fiber producers, the chemical companies, do we see them sort of playing a role in taking back their materials to refurbish them even?
Yes. I mean, we have been working with some organisations in the UK to look at chemical recycling. So we've done a lot of work of recycling plastic bottles back into plastic bottles where they're essentially cleaned and melted again. But looking at things like depolarisation, it's quite a challenge because the equipment is very expensive and you need to be able to guarantee enough of the raw material. I think that's something that will happen, but probably on a European scale rather than at perhaps individual country scale. I think the size of the investment is much bigger.
Right. So again, it kind of speaks back to the need for collaboration, and that this is a system that takes many players. One question that we have also is around, you've demonstrated a lot of momentum that you all have been leading in the UK. Think back to like when it was in its infancy. How do you advise a small city or a large city that isn't doing anything in this space? Like, what does it look like for a city to think about circular economy when they're just getting started?
I mean, that's one thing I'm taking away from this conference, actually, is the focus on cities. Well, cities and citizens, I think. And often to make something happen, you need to choose a smaller area to make it happen. In the UK, Wales is the most advanced place on recycling. And that's, I think, because it's a smaller focus and they can achieve things. We're working with London. We have a joint venture with the London Waste and Recycling Board called Resource London, where we're trying to make change in London. And that's about driving reuse and recycling. That will work much better. But when we're talking about supplying clothes, supplying washing machines, we're really working on the world stage there.
Right.
And I think it's more about the initiatives we just heard about from H&M that will make some of this change mainstream. Yeah,
and it will take municipal systems also to really get engaged within. So do you see that it's a public and a private partnership equation?
It is. I mean, the things that would work on a smaller scale could be some of the repair initiatives. That could be done and be much more successful. There may even be a diseconomy of scale with repair and refurbishment.
And what do you think, we talked a little bit about sort of large supply chain companies getting engaged in this, but what do you see the collaboration of actual big manufacturers and sort of companies and initiatives that will affect their revenues? Like, what role do big manufacturers have in terms of collaborating around that?
The secret for success of the circular economy is collaboration, we said, and it's the whole supply chain from raw material extractor through to consumer, through to recycle recoverer, all working together. And often somebody takes action in one part, but the benefit comes somewhere else. So unless you get that collaboration, it's not going to happen. We have a number of initiatives which are driving that. There's one called the Courtauld Commitment, which is aimed at food and drink. And there, some of the retailers, people like Tesco and Sainsbury in the UK, have committed to help their customers reduce food waste. That means they'll sell less food. But they're embracing that. And I think the reason they're doing it is they're seeing this as a way of giving better service to their customers. So it's about almost product differentiation through the service you supply. And that could mean selling less products, but perhaps getting more value.
So is this going to affect designed obsolescence? I mean, are we going to say goodbye to this concept of designed obsolescence?
What we're proposing here isn't designed obsolescence, but design durability.
Right.
And if the model's changing, you have to do that. So a model where, so the Nudie Jeans, for instance, if they designed the product to not last, their model's going to fall over because everyone will bring them back and it will cost them a lot of money to have it repaired. So I think it's about changing the model. And I mean, the pair of jeans I've got feel almost bulletproof. They do feel like they're designed to last. So I think if the model's changing, then the production and the design will change.
So it sounds to me like the onus really is on the brand, the retailer, or the designer to really make those early decisions.
I think so, but also for the citizen. It's us that buys those things. We can demand different products. So I think we have a big role to play too.
Yeah, and that was going to be my next question is how do you, we talk about activating, circular cities, and how do you activate the circular citizen? One way that you mention is, by getting them engaged in activity around this, making them desire and want these products. Cecilia mentioned that as well too. How do we do that?
We have to be joined up, because if everyone makes the jeans like Nudie Jeans and then the citizen doesn't keep them, then it's worse. So we try to do it through consumer campaigns which try to make consumers aware of the issues and then give them information about what to do. Love Your Clothes, I mentioned, is one of those. We have another one called Love Food, Hate Waste, which is working around food waste. And we're thinking about what would be needed in the electrical space. We don't have a consumer campaign there, but we need to engage with consumers if we're going to take them on this journey.
One of the other questions was really kind of looking at the reality of where we're producing a lot of the products to begin with. And so what are you hearing of or know of the role that China wants to play in the circular economy, and how does that impact regions in Europe as well?
I think we are always going to be dependent on importing. I mean, the UK imports a lot of products. Most of those clothing and electrical goods are imported. And I don't see that changing very fast. But what we might be looking to change is demanding goods which are made to last and then looking after them. That would ultimately mean we would be looking to import fewer goods, but actually spend more on keeping them. And that's an opportunity for us. I guess it's less of an opportunity for China. But that's going to be the power of the consumer, I think. If we're buying these things, we have to demand different.
Well, and the good point that Cecilia made as well too, which is if we're looking at a population of 9 billion and a growing middle class, then while we may be slowing down some of the production cycles, ultimately designing for longevity or for repair or for shared economy, hopefully will maintain world economics, to support all of this.
I think the other thing is, China does understand the circular economy. They introduced a circular economy law some years ago. They see why it's important in China. So I think perhaps China will embrace that and join in this as well.
Yeah, excellent. Any final words of advice to the audience around engaging in their own initiatives in this space?
I think what's important is words rather than action. There are too many people talking about the circular economy. We need more who are doing things, and there are people doing things. It's possible. We heard about H&M doing things. That's great to hear that. So I'd encourage everyone to go back from here and start doing the circular economy rather than talking about the circular economy.
Excellent. Well, thank you. I see there was a long list of questions coming in, and we only had enough time to have the ones that we had, but there's some great ones on here, so I encourage you to find Marcus sometime after this and grab him for questions.